In June of 2022, April Woodside was hired by the Summit County Sheriff's Office to work as a deputy at the jail. Just 4 months into the job, records show she began sending these risque photos of herself to a male inmate. According to investigators, when questioned about it, Woodside admitted to having sex with the prisoner. A deputy having sex with an inmate is a third-degree felony. Ohio law states it's illegal for someone to have sexual conduct with another when the other person is in custody of law and the offender has supervisory or disciplinary authority over the other person. She was fired immediately, and records show the incident was reported to the state. Our review of Woodside's internal investigation found she not only admitted to having sex with the inmate, but also smuggling in an iPhone into his cell. Records show investigators then began monitoring messages on the inmate's jail-issued tablet in 2022. They found he and Woodside texted each other more than 750 times in 1 month. Those messages include profane sexual language and dozens of provocative photos of Woodside posing in skimpy outfits. One night, Woodside texted the inmate asking him to prop his cell door open so she could get in to have sex with him without using her key. They even discussed marriage, Woodside sending him this photo of an engagement ring she had already picked out. Meanwhile, 19 Investigates discovered Woodside was hired this past February as a police officer at University Hospital's Ahuja Medical Center in Beechwood. So how did she get another job in law enforcement after being fired for such serious allegations? The sheriff's office says it's conducting a criminal investigation, but they won't tell us when it began. We do know that Woodside has not been charged with any crimes. We asked UH if they contacted the sheriff's office prior to hiring Woodside. This afternoon, they sent us the following statement. During the hiring process, University Hospital's HR conducted a formal background check and followed standard processes. Nothing of concern, including criminal activity, was found during review. As of this morning, Ms. Woodside was placed on leave while UH conducts its own investigation. We generally don't identify people who claim to be victims of rape, but tonight we're making an exception. He feels the sheriff's office hasn't properly investigated his complaint, despite federal laws that protect him as an inmate. In July of 2022, Jordan Schwartner was arrested on drug charges and serving time at the Summit County Jail. 3 months later, Schwartner says he began flirting with now former deputy April Woodside.
I told her I liked her. I wanted her to be my girl, and that's how it went down.
19 Investigates recorded a phone call with Schwartner, who's currently at the Northeast Ohio Correctional Facility in Youngstown. Records show he and Woodside texted each other more than 750 times in 1 month. They also spoke on the phone.
I told her, let me get a phone number. I got a phone number for her. I started to call her, and then everything went from there.
According to reports, Woodside texted Schwartner these risque photos of herself. The two talked about marriage. Woodside even sent Schwartner pictures of a pricey ring she had picked out.
I bought her a wedding ring for $6,000.
You bought it?
I bought from inside the jail.
19 Investigates obtained audio recordings of internal affairs questioning Woodside about her relationship with Schwartner.
We had intercourse.
You had intercourse?
Yes.
Where did that take place?
In the cell.
Ohio law states it's a third-degree felony for jail staff to have sex with inmates. SCSO says it launched a criminal investigation into this 2 years ago, and it's still ongoing. So far, no charges have been filed. However, Woodside was fired, and Schwartner says he never heard from her again. 8 months later, in June of 2023, Schwartner says he filed a rape complaint against Woodside, claiming that, as an inmate, he wasn't able to consent to sex.
There's no consent in there. I have no consent to give. I'm a ward of the state. I'm traumatized by this.
Congress passed the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA, back in 2003. It was designed to protect prisoners from being sexually assaulted by staff and other inmates. We questioned SCSO about Schwartner's complaint. They told us the PREA criminal complaint is currently under investigation and not completed. The federal PREA statute states the investigating agency has 90 days to issue a final determination on whether the complaint is credible. Schwartner says detectives interviewed him once after he filed his complaint 16 months ago, then he never heard back.
You're the first investigator to follow up. obviously that they don't care about our safety and our you feel me, our well-being as inmates and prisoners.
19 Investigates questioned SCSO about why the investigation is taking so long, but they won't comment on open cases. Meanwhile, Schwertner feels the scales of justice are stacked against him.
I'm traumatized. I'm scared. I'm in prison right now doing time, and I'm around a whole bunch of people that could be doing the same thing to me that she did to me.
We tried contacting Woodside, but she hasn't commented. We also reached out to the Department of Justice. They say someone will get back to us. We'll, of course, keep you posted. Mike Mason, 19 News. In October of 2022, Jordan Schwertner was serving time at the Summit County Jail on drug charges. Records show he and then Summit County Deputy April Woodside began a sexual relationship while she worked at the jail. She later admitted this to investigators.
We had intercourse.
You had intercourse?
Yes.
Where did that take place?
In the cell.
The jail's shift commander at the time says deputies also suspected Woodside was smuggling drugs into the jail.
I had a deputy come to me from day shift and state that he believes that she's selling drugs to inmates or giving drugs to inmates on the pod.
Charles worked for the Summit County Sheriff's Office for nearly 25 years. He recently resigned as lieutenant. Since he still works in law enforcement, he asked us to identify him only by his first name. Records show when deputies questioned Woodside, she denied giving drugs to Schwertner.
Did you bring cocaine?
No, I did not. I did not.
However, Schwertner claims she did.
Yeah, she was bringing me a whole bunch of
Schwertner's now in a state prison. We spoke with him by phone. What kind of drugs did she bring you?
I had meth, coke, heroin, fentanyl.
A few days before Woodside was fired for having sex with Schwertner, he says deputies raided his cell. 19 Investigates obtained records showing they found suspected narcotics. The report also listed Woodside as the sole suspect, but we don't know if those items were tested to confirm whether they were drugs. We do know neither Woodside nor Schwertner have been charged in connection with that case.
They found contraband, cigarettes, lighters, and possible drugs in the cell.
What was done about that?
To my knowledge, nothing.
In Ohio, it's a felony for an officer to have sex with or provide drugs to an inmate. But in October of 2022, the investigator wrote, although the investigation is not closed, it was not being pursued criminally at this time. And this report states Woodside's criminal case was closed 2 months later. However, SCSO now tells 19 Investigates this case is still open. According to reports, it's clear SCSO suspected someone smuggled drugs into the jail. Now Charles is concerned whether this case will be properly investigated.
I can't think of anybody in the jail that escaped charges for having drugs and contraband inside the jail.
SCSO's policy states all controlled substances will be submitted to BCI for testing. So we asked the sheriff's office if they sent the items to BCI, but they haven't responded. We then requested the results from BCI, but they told us we found no laboratory submissions and no BCI investigation related to April Woodside.
I've never seen where somebody has covered up something so blatant.
Is it a cover-up?
I believe so, yes.
DOJ is still reviewing this complaint that Charles filed online. We did reach out to Woodside and Sheriff Candy Fothery for comment, but we haven't heard back. Mike Mason, 19 News. 2 years ago, this woman admitted to having sex with an inmate, and she was then fired. So we wanted to know how she managed to get hired as an officer again by university hospitals here. First, we want to warn you, though, that this report contains some explicit content. In June of 2022, April Woodside was hired by the Summit County Sheriff's Office to work as a deputy at the jail. Just 4 months into the job, records show she began sending these risque photos of herself to a male inmate. 19 Investigates obtained the audio from when Internal Affairs questioned Woodside about her sexual relationship with that inmate, which happens to be a third-degree felony in Ohio.
We had intercourse.
You had intercourse?
Yes.
Where did that take place?
In the cell.
Did he have a bunkmate at the time?
Yes.
Okay. What was the bunkmate doing?
Sleeping.
Records show Woodside was fired immediately. This past February, she was hired as a police officer at University Hospital's Ahuja Medical Center in Beechwood. Last month, 19 Investigates questioned UH about why they hired Woodside after she was terminated by the sheriff's office. 1 week later, UH sent us an email stating, based on the investigation into the circumstances of her hiring, the decision was made to terminate Officer Woodside's employment with UH. We then asked UH whether they had contacted Summit County or requested Woodside's personnel file prior to hiring her. They haven't answered those specific questions, but the sheriff's office tells us that UH police did not contact them prior to or after Woodside's employment. We did reach out to Woodside, but she said she had no comment. The Summit County Sheriff's Office confirms that after 2 years, they are still conducting a criminal investigation into Woodside's actions. Mike Mason, 19 News. This past June, 70-year-old Freddie Lardell was set to be released from the Summit County Jail, but records show deputies mistakenly released 56-year-old Lydell Gladney instead. The sheriff's office says Gladney managed to impersonate Lardell and walk out of jail. 19 Investigates found this year a total of 4 Summit County inmates either escaped or were inadvertently released from jail. The law states SCSO must alert local law enforcement agencies whenever this happens, but Highway Patrol says they were never notified. Our reports then prompted Ohio's Department of Rehabilitation and Correction to investigate Gladney's wrongful release. They say SCSO was required to report the incident to them, but never did. ODRC found SCSO violated 2 of the state's minimum standards for jail operations. First, a deputy released Gladney from his housing unit without checking his photo ID or release documents. Then, another deputy gave Gladney Lardell's money and belongings without verifying who he was. SCSO's investigation found Gladney even attempted to show one deputy his identification, but the deputy can be seen on camera never once checking his bracelet. 8 days after leaving jail, Gladney was arrested and charged with escape, theft, and identity fraud. The 2 deputies who mistakenly released Gladney were both reprimanded. SCSO also sent the state a plan of action to keep this from happening again. Mike Mason, 19 News. When an inmate escapes, the sheriff's office is required to report it to local law enforcement and the media. But we found that's not always happening. This year alone, at least 4 inmates have escaped from the Summit County Sheriff's custody. They are Claudel Bowman, Dominic Smith, Ransom Moffitt, and Lydell Gladney. State law requires the sheriff to notify authorities whenever this happens. Ohio's Department of Rehabilitation and Correction pointed to Ohio's revised code, which states if a person who's convicted or pleaded guilty to an offense escapes from a county jail or custody of the sheriff shall immediately report it to all local law enforcement agencies, state highway patrol, and in some cases, ODRC and a local newspaper. ODRC confirmed the sheriff's office failed to report Gladney's escape. Records show deputies mistakenly released him. The sheriff's investigation found deputies failed to double-check Gladney's wristband, photo, and social security number. ODRC says the sheriff was required to notify them about the escape, but never did. As a result, the Bureau of Adult Detention is now investigating. We contacted Highway Patrol to see if the sheriff notified them. They're still checking it out. Each inmate in our report was later arrested. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office has declined to comment. Mike Mason, 19 News. This year alone, at least 4 Summit County inmates have escaped custody. We've now obtained evidence indicating another inmate with a violent criminal history has been on the run for over 2 years, and the sheriff's office may have purposely kept you from knowing about it. This year, at least 4 Summit County inmates have escaped. They include Claudel Bowman, Dominic Smith, Lydell Gladney, and Ransom Moffitt. This summer, Moffitt was working at the jail cleaning the front lobby when he bolted out the front door. Surveillance video captured him running across the parking lot and down the street. Officers later caught up with Moffitt at his friend's garage.
Come here, guy.
Yeah, you, come here.
Come on, man. What's your name?
You want to tell him we got him?
What's your name? All right.
The sheriff's office policy states when an inmate escapes, the shift commander will notify communications to advise all law enforcement agencies in Summit County and the State Highway Patrol. and the sheriff shall also notify local media outlets. That's similar to Ohio's revised code. However, the state only requires the sheriff to notify them when inmates escape directly from jail. 19 Investigates emailed Highway Patrol to see if SCSO notified them about the escapees. They replied saying, "We can confirm that the patrol was not notified of any of the incidents you listed. 2 of those incidents happened within 2 days. On June 5th, Dominic Smith ran when officers tried picking him up at a treatment facility. The next day, Lydell Gladney walked out of jail when deputies mistakenly released him. Both men were later arrested by Akron police, but their escapes were not reported to Highway Patrol. Since Gladney escaped from the jail and the sheriff's office failed to notify the state, ODRC is now investigating. Highway Patrol confirms they also received no notification when inmate Preston Hill escaped 2 years ago. Hill failed to return to jail after a judge granted him furlough in April of 2022. Hill's felony rap sheet dates back 20 years, and he was last indicted for trafficking fentanyl. He also has prior convictions for trafficking heroin, assault, domestic violence, aggravated menacing, and weapons charges. But when Hill failed to return to jail, the sheriff's office apparently failed to notify Highway Patrol or the public. In fact, 19 Investigates obtained these text messages from April of 2022. Here, an SCSO officer is texting a member of the task force, instructing him to get on the Hill case first thing tomorrow. He goes on to say, "Can you let them know absolutely no press release on this one?" SCSO never notified the media or the public about Hill's escape. Now, over 2 years later, a potentially dangerous felon remains at large. SCSO says that text about Hill was sent to multiple agencies, but they won't say which ones or why they never issued a press release. We wanted to know if Akron police had been notified, but they told us to contact SCSO. We also requested an interview with Sheriff Candy Fothery, but she declined. Mike Mason, 19 News. After reporting this incident, the state found deputies violated several policies. Tonight, we're hearing what those deputies told investigators about how this all happened in the first place. This past June, Summit County deputies were supposed to release 70-year-old inmate Freddie Lardell. However, they released 56-year-old Lydell Gladney instead. Surveillance video recently obtained from the Summit County Sheriff's Office shows Gladney and 3 other inmates walking down the jail's hallway in orange jumpsuits. A deputy can be seen escorting them to the property room to pick up their belongings. 9 minutes later, Gladney returns sporting Lardell's baseball jersey. Gladney can then be seen walking through the jail's lobby and out the front door. Deputy Aaron McLaughlin was in charge of taking Lardell out of his cell. When questioned by investigators, he admitted he never checked the inmate's identity.
Do you ask him like birthday? Do you ask him social? Do you check his photo?
Yeah, I could do all that.
But did you do it that day?
No.
Okay.
Investigators asked McLaughlin how he knew who the inmate was.
If you didn't check his wristband ID, how did you confirm his identity?
So, I mean, just going off of like, this was the person that came forward after I yelled out this name.
And you're saying, essentially, you call out a name, and if someone comes to the door, you let them out without checking their identification, correct?
Correct.
Deputy Kayla Zalay was in charge of giving inmates their belongings. When questioned, Zalay said she remembered one inmate failed to identify himself.
I know I had somebody in that group who didn't know their social, and I did have to verify by birthday.
Did the inmate at any time attempt to show you his wristband or attempt to ID himself?
No, he never was like, I'm so-and-so. No.
But according to the report, that's not true. Investigators wrote Gladney attempted to show Zalay his ID bracelet, but Zalay can be seen on camera footage looking at paperwork, never once checking his bracelet. Zalay told investigators that deputies are trained to verify an inmate's identity by scanning the pupils of their eyes, and they use an iris scanner to do that.
Iris is supposed to be how we're supposed to do it, but Iris has been down since we did our training in April.
After Gladney's wrongful release, it took 8 long days before he was located and arrested by police. When we first reported this incident, we found the sheriff's office failed to notify state officials about Gladney's escape. The state investigated and found SCSO violated several policies regarding the inmate's release. Both deputies involved in this were later reprimanded. Mike Mason, 19 News. Romer wants the new program to work like an Amber Alert, immediately notifying law enforcement agencies and you whenever a felon is on the loose. Romer calls his bill the Escaped Convict Alert System.
If you're an escaped felon, we want you returned to jail, and we want the public safe, and we want communication to all the appropriate law enforcement agencies.
The program is designed to immediately notify local law enforcement agencies and the media when a felon escapes law enforcement custody. And the bill defines felons as anyone convicted of or has pleaded guilty to a felony offense and anyone indicted or charged with a felony. This comes after 19 Investigates found at least 4 Summit County inmates who escaped custody this year alone. And Highway Patrol says they weren't notified as required by state law.
Channel 19 definitely provided a lot of background, and it did lead to me offering this bill.